Yeah.
Hello, Dave. Welcome to my podcast, One for the Road. Welcome, mate. And for those who can't see you, they can see you on my YouTube channel, but you have the most beautiful room with a purple
Oh,
sofa and a guitar in the background, which will lead into your story later on. But how are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, it's lovely to be here.
Good. And we realised on our pre-call that we literally live about 6 miles from each other, which is random.
Yeah, that was a bit freaky. And when you said you live where you lived, I was like, oh, wow, that's
I
ridiculous.
know. And we were probably in the same place this morning. I might have walked past you, but I know what you look like now. So anyway,
Uh,
well, welcome to the podcast, mate. And I've read your story and it's a really fascinating one. And I always like to start in the beginning of where you grew up and what your childhood was like, and then we can get into it from there.
sure. Okay. Well, I grew up in this area, which is Leicestershire and Rutland. Um, I went to primary school in a place called Waltham on the Wolds, which isn't too far from where I am now. And that was good. I enjoyed that. I had a village upbringing, a nice little village. I lived in a village called Eton, spelled with an A, not like the posh school. And and yeah, it was a great place to play outside and play with my friends and do things I shouldn't have been doing in farmers' fields and whatever else and haystacks and whatever. But it was brilliant, and I enjoyed the primary school was great too. Um, that was all tickety boo, really. I really enjoyed all of that. Then prior to that, I mean, my going from the very beginning, my family are all Scottish and they moved down when I was very young. But I was born and lived there very early on. And then we lived in Bedworth until I was 5. And then we moved into this area where I still am.
Oh, it's a beautiful area, mate. And it sounds
It
idyllic.
is.
Bit like
It
the
is.
darling buds of May, like haystacks and farmers' fields and
It is. It's idyllic, and that village I grew up in was just amazing. I still go back there sometimes, and do the memory lane thing, and it's
yeah.
just a chocolate box village, And it had this amazing different places to explore and climb trees and do all the things that you want to do when you're a young boy. It was amazing.
The old-fashioned childhood, mate, without all the bloody devices and everything now.
Well, yeah, to a point. I mean, I did end up getting computers. I kind of ended up growing up in the 80s, so those things did creep in. But you're right. I mean, I as a kid, I always wanted to play out with my friends. I've always been gregarious, company loving, and I was as a kid, and I still am.
Yeah,
That's something that I always wanted to be, rather than be inside. I wanted to be out with my mates doing
yeah,
something.
yeah. Was it come home in the dark or when you're hungry? That was
It was yeah, it was always come home before it's dark. Yeah, and I could always hear there was a church clock that had bells that used to go, and you'd kind of, oh, was that far? I think that was 5 o'clock, and then you'd be here the next one. Oh no, it's 7. Oh no,
yeah, shit, I'm in
I'm gonna
trouble.
get a bollocking.
Yeah. I
But
yeah, so I had a similar kind of upbringing, as in like always out and about and over Mitcham Common I used to go, and there's a place called Seven Islands, which was 7 lakes, like little tiny lakes and that. We used to go
okay,
playing over there, and it was quite an innocent childhood. But it's when we moved, like when I was 11 or 12, yeah, 12 years old, that thing started to change because I had a thing with my identity and I had to change schools and everything. And that's when I got into trouble with the booze. So, how
mm.
old was you when things started to change?
Well, after my when I left primary school, I ended up going to a private school in Oakham, which is in Rutland, and I ended up getting a music scholarship there eventually to help pay for the fees and everything. And I started playing music when I was about 11. Started the clarinet and took off with that, and was progressed very quickly. Did my grade 5 within a year, and so on. And that does change things. It changes things for everybody, doesn't it? Big school, and it was a big school, 1,000 odd pupils, and at a time when I've been at a school with like 40 kids,
Mm.
it's like it's a lot, and it was scary, and I had to travel in every day, and it was hard. That was a difficult time for sure. The I mean, I liked things about it, but it was hard, you know. And the first time I ever had any problems before the alcohol really was I had I've always suffered with, well, the first time I had anxiety or depression or anything like that was when I was 13, and I had I don't know what's really to this day what sparked it, other than turning 13 and suddenly becoming aware of my own mortality or something. And I hit a massive depressive patch, and I I was upset a lot of the time. It was something I had to deal with on my own. I didn't really share it with anyone. I got found upset a couple of times, but then it never got really followed up. So I think I probably dealt with that for about a year, which is hard for someone who's only 13, you know. And plus you're trying to cope with school and everything else that you're doing. So that happened. And then things rolled on. I mean, at school, I got on okay at school. I mean, I had friends. I'm kind of a social chameleon, I like to think, and I can adapt to the social situation that I'm in. So I can play the fool with people and be a lad, or I can behave myself and, you know, and be well spoken in another part, or, you know, it's, you know, communication is something that I find relatively easy, you know, and I can adapt and communicate pretty well. So I got on okay, and I like to have a laugh, and, you know, I can have me moments when I can be funny. So it's I got on okay, but it's still hard, you know. School is, and also I was learning the clarinet, and, you know, when you're doing things like that at school, you know, as a bloke, it's, you know, you get the piss taken out of you all the time. That's hard, you know, because you're doing you're playing your clarinet and your classical music, you know, and then you get ribbed for it. That's hard because you try and hide it, you know. And I tried to keep that within the music department at the school. The school was big enough to have a music department, you know. And I ended up spending a lot of time there, so I could just kind of lock myself away and do what I was doing with that, really. But I was a good sportsman as well. I mean, I was in sports teams. I was particularly good athlete. I was fast at running and that kind of thing, and got on well with that. So I wasn't like somebody who didn't engage with those other things at school. But drinking first started, I would say, when I was probably about 15, and it started at home with my parents, wine after dinner, with dinner or whatever, you know. We used to go on these holidays, you know. In fact, I was down there recently, Folkestone, with the band I play in. We played at Lees Cliff Hall in Folkestone recently, and then there's the Bursting Hotel, which is on the seafront there, which is it looks, well, I probably shouldn't say, but it doesn't look its best now. But at the time, it was like in the 80s, it was like supposedly a posh holiday to go there. And it was that kind of place where you went, and then my mum and dad would get dressed up for dinner, and my dad would put a suit and tie on and everything, and then we'd go down for dinner, you know, and you start to get a glass of wine with the meal and that kind of thing. I was the eldest of three brothers, and I'm the eldest, and so I was the first to get this, you know. I'd get a bit of flipping Blue Nun or Peace Porter or whatever it was.
How old was you?
I think I was 14 or 15.
Yeah.
Something like that. That started to happen. And it was occasional, and it was not a problem. And then at school, it started to creep in with my friends, maybe when I was like 15, 16. I think that's generally when it kind of starts to happen, doesn't it? You know, your mates are doing it. And I remember bottles of brandy appearing, and when we're having a night out somewhere, I was staying over where the school is. Because that was the thing, because I had a drive. It was like a 15-mile drive from where I lived with my parents into school. So sometimes I'd stay in Oakham where the school was, because I'd stay with my friends or whatever. And that would then allow shenanigans to take place, you know. So that's where the drinking started. And also, it was the 80s. This would talking, what year would it be now? I don't know, 84, 80, something like 80, no, maybe mid 80s anyway. Long time ago. But there was also a culture around drinking, not in lessons or anything like that, but like, you know, in the school environment, you know, there'd be alcohol available like after concerts, things like that, you know. And you know, as a kid, you get smart and you get to work out that you can get a glass or two and that kind of thing. And some yeah, so that was going on, you know, and I think I think what I need to say is that I, as well, I did get on with my friends at school, but I always found social interaction difficult in the fact that I was shy. You know, I mean, shyness is not an uncommon thing, and I definitely had that. And in when social situations were difficult, I think alcohol, I found it really helped. I felt helped me to, I realized that it could sort of help me come out of my shell a little bit. And I realized that at about 16, 15, 16, I realized that drinking was, it feels a bit easier if I have
Yeah.
a couple, you know. And then you start to get a taste for it or wanting to do that, you know, around social events or when you're mixing with other people and going to parties and that sort of thing. So it definitely started around there. And I think towards the end of my school years, I was probably drinking, you know, quite a lot, you know, when I was staying over in Oakham or around there. And I mean, also I drank with my dad. You know, my dad worked hard. He had his own business, which he had in Melton Mowbray for a number of years. He was an electronics engineer and he had a company there. And my dad would come home, he'd work late, he'd come home, he'd have his tea, and then he'd go down the pub, you know, and he'd drink pints of mixed, which for people that don't know is mild and bitter mixed together. He'd buy me one, and we'd have a few pints together, and we played darts or whatever in this local pub, and that was something I did not every night, but it was something I did with my dad, you know. So
Yeah.
it was, you know, he was showing me the way really from a relatively early age. That was probably happening in my late teens, you know, that I was going down to the pub with my dad, you know, and you're already forming a habit right there, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
and it was a different era, wasn't it? Because we didn't have the information that we got now. So I remember my son when he was 16, and he was junior captain at his golf club, right? So there were loose rules around drinking. Do you know what I
mm,
mean? And he was 16. I bought him a beer and said, "I'll take our picture," and I put a quote on Facebook. Now he becomes a man. That kind of rubbish. Do you know what I
ah,
mean?
well, actually, that's an interesting one because what I do remember is being in a pub with my dad and a school teacher, and it was before a concert or something. I can't remember the circumstances, but um, this teacher was getting around in, so he said, "Oh, what do you want?" And my dad was having a pint, and I said I didn't know what to say because I think it was the first time I'd been asked if I wanted a drink in front of my dad by someone else.
Yeah,
So I tried to do the right thing, and I said, "Oh, I'll just have a half of bitter or something like that." And my dad turned to me and said, "No son of mine drinks halves."
yeah, yeah.
You
See what I
know,
mean?
and
So he's already,
it was right there.
yeah, 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 yeah,
What are you doing? You know, get a pint. So I did. And maybe that was a green light, you know, in some ways as well. It was like, you know, if you're going to drink, drink properly, you know,
yeah, yeah,
whatever that is. But
yeah.
so it did start early on. And I think, but where it really kicked off was when I got to college and university. I went to Manchester. I initially went to Manchester University to read music. And not long after being there, I also joined a thing called the Joint Course in Manchester, which was a course that musicians did where they went to the university and the Royal Northern College of Music at the same time. So you could
Right.
do two things together. Um, and that's what I did. And definitely fitting in at university to begin with was hard. I really struggled with that. When I went there, I'm trying to remember where I was in my mind, but I was quite into classical music at that time rather than the kind of music I played later on in life. But and I was quite focused on that, and so a bit more arty, I suppose you'd say. And I knew some people that were going to Manchester as well, and they were going to be doing similar courses. And they were all going to a particular hall of residence, which was near the music department, and it was a mixed hall, and I liked the idea of that environment. But of course, I didn't get put in that hall of residence, did I? I got put in a different one, and which was an all-male hall, which had lots of rugby players in it and a massive drinking culture.
Yeah.
And I wasn't frightened of the drinking per se, but I didn't really feel like I fitted in, you know, because I thought, well, these are all kind of sports people and I'm kind of like arty, and it was difficult. And I spent a whole bunch of time trying to, for the first couple of months, I guess, trying to fit in with the people who were on my course, who were living in a different environment to me. And there was a day when it became apparent to me that I, I don't know, I was trying to hang with them and it wasn't working out. And it was because they were living somewhere else. And it dawned on me, I thought, this isn't going to work. I was trying too hard. And I kind of had a bit of a breakdown that day. I remember it. I got really upset because I realized that I couldn't fit in with that group. And I walked back to my hall of residence and I was visibly upset. And I got back and I thought, what am I going to do about this? And I thought, well, I'm just going to have to join in here. This is what I'm going to have to do. And I literally went straight out my room and went to the JCR, junior con room, whatever they call it. And they had a massive drinking culture at this hall of residence at the time. Drinking games that involved seeing off pints, which is like downing a pint, things like that. They would do it on a Sunday. They had a game where they had a swing bin in the middle of the room. And if you needed to, throw up or something, it had to go in the bucket. And it was disgusting, but this was the culture. There was a massive drinking culture. Get it down you. There was parties all the time. We're going out all the time. Every night was drinking night. We're going down this place. We're going down here. And I got a reputation very quickly for someone that could put it away, because that was part of the bravado of it. You could see off pints. I mean, in those days, you're drinking probably watered down Tetley, not tea, the beer, and so it's probably not very strong in terms of what people are drinking today, like 5-6% lagers all the time. But still, you were putting a lot of beer away. I remember I've got a friend from those days who I caught up with not long ago. We're still friends. And he's just retired from a very senior position in the army, so I won't tell you who he is. but he remembers those days, and we were recounting them. And he said, "Do you remember that week there was a challenge if you could drink 100 pints in a week?" And I said, "Was there?" He said, "Yeah, He said, "Yeah, we did it." I said, "What? And I'm still alive?" It's like, yeah, apparently, 10 a day is 70. How the hell did it get 80 pints down in a week?
That's some going. But the thing is, right, if you got yourself a reputation, then you were accepted, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It was part of me being a centre of social inclusion, I go to therapy now, but maybe I had issues then about wanting to be accepted, and that was my gateway to it. I could put beer away. I was a laugh, and I always wanted to go out. Do you know what I mean? I was also like, "Come on, let's go here." And when other people were calling it a night, I was saying, "Let's go on to another place." I wanted to keep going till it closed. That's how it was. And that's how my university and college life kind of went, really. I did it in a functioning way. I didn't really drink in the day, and I didn't, and I was late for some rehearsals sometimes. I do remember the games.
Well, not surprised on 100 pints a week, mate.
I remember, the fear of dread. Places like the Royal Northern College of Music. Even though those are tertiary education places, they're run kind of like schools. They're very different to the university. The university they treat like adults. The college, I felt that wasn't quite like that. It was like, it was much stricter, and if you missed, they're trying to drill good practice into you, to be fair. And you don't miss rehearsals as a professional musician. You're not late. Being late is like the worst thing. And if you miss a rehearsal, no. So if you wake up and you slept through your alarm, not good.
Yeah. So when you left uni in that, did your drinking carry on? What did you do?
Yeah, so I stayed in Manchester, actually. Once I graduated, I was playing in groups there, trying to carve out a living playing. And I think I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. I ended up getting in a band from home. That's what I was still traveling back to Oakham sometimes in the holidays. My parents had, my dad had lost his business in the early 90s, and my parents lost their home, which was, that's not a great time, you know. And I remember drinking quite a lot around that time and getting called up for it actually by the vice principal of the college at the time, you know, a guy called Chris Yates, his name was. He was a flute player, but he was vice principal. A lovely man he was. But yeah, he called me in one day and said, "Dave, is everything okay? You know, you seem to be drinking a lot." And I was like, "Well, no, some stuff's been going down. It's not great." But he's like, "Yeah, you need to rein it in a bit, you know." So I got a bit of a ticking off. They're also checking you're okay, you know. So, but yeah, that was a difficult time. And then afterwards, yeah, I got into a band with back at home, and I ended up moving back to Oakham area, and just basically spent a bunch of time bouncing around, being in bands, trying to be a pop star, you know, writing music and playing stuff. I trained as a saxophone player, but I also played guitar, keyboards, and other things as well. So that's what I was doing. The next, during that, yeah, drinking was happening. Plus, at that time, you know, there's a little bit of smoking going on as well. You know, that kind of thing. You know, I was a jazz musician at the end of the day. You know, so there was some of that going on. But what I do remember is the drinking was always there. You know, it was always happening with everyone else as we in the music world as you get on with it. You know, it's just part. It's part of the scene, really, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few musicians on the podcast, you know, and it's the same old thing. Starting drinking young, and you know, like I remember Adrian Cox, he's a clarinet player, and that, and he was saying that you know he started really really young, and they forced him to drink like a man. You know, if you want to be in the band, you've got to drink like a man in the band. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's
Well, it's definitely an inclusion thing within the industry. One of the books I read. I mean, I've read a lot of books about self development and you know sobriety and things like that. And I'd read Adrian Charles, the
yeah
TV presenter, wrote a book called The Good Drinker, which is kind of about moderation. But in that, he talks about how in the TV world, you know, getting on was you had to get on socially in order to get along the ladder in the career. You know, you had to
yeah
be out with people. If you weren't drinking with people and going to the party, you weren't going to get asked to do certain projects. You know,
yeah
that's kind of how he phrased it. And I think music is very much like that. You have to. It's a social environment, really. And I definitely you know, got involved into things because of the fact that I'd met people in the pub or was drinking with them.
yeah
And we'll come on to more of that, I'm sure, in a moment. But what I do remember, as it's relevant to other parts of my story, is that when I was at home during this period, my middle brother started to experience some mental health issues, particularly or specifically psychosis and like schizophrenia and that sort of thing, which culminated in one day having quite a severe attack. And I'd never experienced anything like that. And I ended up having to deal with it because for some reason I seemed to be the person that was best suited to deal with it. I don't know why. My parents didn't really know what to do, I don't think. And I ended up being in a room with him for about 6 hours. He wouldn't let me leave, and all sorts of strange things were going on. And the end of the day, what happened was he ended up getting sectioned, and his history of mental illness kind of started there, really. And it was hugely traumatic. I remember having to deal with it in the aftermath, and he was staying in hospital. I mean, he was coming out and going back in, and I remember thinking, I mean, I'd have been about 23 at the time, maybe. Not old, you know,
yeah
but it was too much for me to deal with. I wanted to get on with my life, you know.
yeah cool
So I chose at that point to go back to Manchester. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was kind of just running away, I think.
yeah
And I went back there with no plan. And it was not a good move, really. It was what I felt I needed to do, but I kind of ended up in it. It was one of the low points of my life, really, because I ended up living in and not the best area of Manchester. I was in I don't like to talk about where people live in negative terms, but for me, anyway, at the time, Levenshulme was not the best place for me to be. And I got mixed up with some people that were involved in, you know, just difficult circumstances, you know, and there was a lot of drinking going on and there was drug taking and things. And I was in one of the guys I used to hang out with was kind of like basically a low, you know, small time dealer, you know, and it was a difficult time, you know. I was a bit lost, really, and I was there not for very long, about 5 or 6 months, and it culminated in me getting drunk one day and having falling off a chair in a pub and breaking my fall onto a glass which was broken on the floor and cutting my hand here in a quite a severe way, and I had to have had to go and have surgery on my hand to put it back together again, with nerves and everything, and that kind of got me out of there and back home. So that was not a good time, you know. And then I just got back into more bands back at home, and it was at that point I was in a band and it ended up being managed by a chap called Dave Bartram, who's the lead singer of Showaddywaddy, and Dave was managing this band we were doing, trying to get us a record deal. Didn't happen in the end. We got very close, but that was where I first got to know Dave, because he lived in the area and was friends with the singer in that band. And I met him in a pub, of course, having a pint. And then he ended up managing this band we were doing. So that's what happened there. We never made it, as it were, as they say. But we had a good go. And then things rolled on. Ended up meeting my wife, getting married, having 2 children, getting a job, and ended up working at the school where I'd gone to school. So I became a teacher because I had to grow up a bit. I had to get a proper job. I couldn't just sit around waiting to be a pop star. You know, it clearly wasn't happening. So that's what I did. So and I suppose, you know, my drinking kind of calmed down a bit. I mean, I still drank. I always did. You know, it was always there. Yeah. But you know, I was trying to, you know, be a father and hold down a proper job, you know, but drinking was still, there's part of the culture of working amongst teachers. I mean, teachers drink, they do. Yeah. You know, they'd break this to people, but
no, I've got a friend, Charlie, who's a teacher, and it's rife in the field. Well, it's rife everywhere, actually. You know,
well, it is.
There's hardly anyone I ever speak to and they don't say, do you know what? In my industry, drinking's absolutely mad, because it's in every industry, which is shocking, really.
Well, it is. It's a thing we use to cope, to de-stress. You know, we're looking forward to it at the end of the day. It's how we kind of let our hair down, as they say, and relax. And that's where my drinking had evolved to that point. Even at this point, it was just like something that I suppose we're getting to the point where now this is what I do to relax. You know, this is what I do to unwind. Yeah. Even if it was just having a couple after work and then going home to help at home, and then cracking open a bottle of wine, which is what parents do. They're not drinking in the pub so much because they've got children, so they're drinking at home and they're drinking at, you know, bottles of wine. And I do that with my ex-wife, you know. And it's like, but the thing is, you know, because I want to speak about that with drinking. It was like, for me, it was never something I wanted to do on my own. Do you know what I mean? It was like, this was a social thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to share it with other people, and you know, come on, you're gonna have a drink with me, you know, let's go to the pub, let's have a bottle of wine, whatever it was something I wanted to do with others. And it wasn't difficult to find people who wanted to do that with you after work, you know. So it was kind of, you know, still there as I worked through all of that part of my life, you know. But I didn't really think of it as a problem at that point. I mean, it probably was too much, but to me it was normal, you know. And I was just getting on with the rest of my life. But roll forward to 2000 and well, 2008 really was when the first tragedy kind of came for me. And that was when, well, it was in 2007, and my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and you know, that was a tough time, and it made me think and reevaluate what I was doing. And I decided I'd already started running a business, which was like a music agency, so providing bands and musicians for people that wanted them for parties or whatever. And I was doing that as a bit of a side hustle, but it was picking up. And then when my dad got ill, I kind of thought, well, you've only got one life. I kind of had a little bit of those realizations, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to give this a go. So I decided to hand my notice in at the school and do that instead. And so that was what I did. And then my dad passed away in May 2008. But prior to that, I got a phone call one day, and because my dad had ended up being the person that looked after my brother quite a lot, really. And he was living in Nottingham at the time. And I got a call, basically, and my brother had died in his flat had been found in his flat in Nottingham. And this was, he was 32. And my dad was in hospital dying of cancer at the time. And in fact, he died the week later. But we had to go and tell my dad that my brother was dead, and which was harrowing to say the least. And then my dad died the following week. And then because we thought it would be somehow easier, we had a joint funeral day, so I had my dad's funeral. And then when we took him out the church, my brother was in a hearse outside, and then we went to the crematorium and had a service for him. And then, so that was pretty traumatic to say the least, and this was at the point when I was kind of finishing up with leaving the school and trying to run my business. And I started, and I was doing that. And it wasn't long after that also weirdly, and it sounds like a crazy story, but then this was then Dave Bartram rang me out of the blue. I hadn't spoken to him for a few years. And he said, you don't know any sax players, do you? He said, we're looking for them for the band. And I said, as it happens, I've just left the school where I was working, which would have permitted me from doing it. I wouldn't have been able to do it, would have prevented me, from doing it. And but I was free. I said, well, I can do it. So I joined the band anyway, and ended up touring with them as well as running my business until the end of 2011, which was the point where Dave retired from the band. And I decided at that point to retire from it too, because I wanted to focus on my business and my family. So I've kind of said a lot in that time, but there was a lot of change happening.
Well, it was yin and yang, wasn't it, mate? You had your dad and your brother, but then the opportunity of the band.
Yes.
So exactly. It was all over the place, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I thought, well, that's something else for me to do. So I did that. And it was probably good for me. But it was maybe very busy because I was doing that at weekends, and then still running a business in the week, it was pretty full on. So that rolled on, and then it got to 2016, and my wife and I separated, and I found that very hard. We never want these things to happen. But that's what took place, and I ended up, being a 45-year-old bloke living on his own, and I was deeply unhappy, and of course, when you live on your own, there's no one asking where you are if you're late in or anything. You've got free reign to do what you want, and so I definitely, my drinking definitely got worse after that, and it was just something, again, I regularly did with friends in the pub, but I was just doing it all the time, apart from when I was working. If I was gigging or something and had to drive somewhere, clearly I wouldn't, but so it wouldn't necessarily be every night, but it was most of the time when I could, it would be there,
And just to clarify, mate, because you said before, but at no point, even now, you still weren't interested in drinking on your own. It was purely a social belief.
Yeah. And even then, I didn't drink at home. I don't think I even had any in the fridge. You know, I would stay at the pub till it closed, and I'd just go home, go to bed.
Yeah.
You know, that was
So,
kind of
so
how
it's
I
a
rolled.
social escapism with people,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's the
absolutely.
difference between you and me, because I ended up not wanting to be with people because alcohol isolated me so much that I wanted to be on my own. So
Wow.
it's
Okay.
fascinating that how many people are so different with their drinking. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mine was definitely a social thing, and I wanted it to be with other people, um, and that.
laugh and joke and tell
Yeah,
story
and
and
I wouldn't want that to end because
yeah, yeah.
that's what I enjoyed doing, you know. And for me, once I was on my own, it would be like it's over, you know. Now,
Yeah,
you know.
but it was for me, mate, because I used to have the headphones on in the dark listening to Pink Floyd until I pulled my eyes out. Do you know what I mean?
Oh
So
wow, yeah.
it was a
I mean,
different experience.
yeah. I mean, although of course this the caveat to that being COVID, because of course 3 years later,
Yeah.
or 4 years later, whatever, COVID arrived, and that changed all the rules because now I couldn't go to the pub because it was closed, and there was no way I was just going to stop drinking. That wasn't an option. That's interesting
Yeah.
because then I was just drinking at home, you know, and you know, gin and slimline tonic or poppy ales in the fridge, whatever it was, you know, and I was chatting to people on Zoom like we are now, you know.
Oh, so you were still socializing, but via
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But then there was no closing time, so it was up for. I mean, I've got these stories from my friends about how I fall asleep, you know, while I was talking to them, you know, because we just gone on too long, you know. Uh, it's crazy, you know. Um, so that's what was happening then, and you know, chronologically now in the story, this is the next trauma that happened for me. So I was already dealing with this isolation of being on my own and trying to and dealing with my business, which was focused around events, of course, which were all completely, you know,
Yeah.
nuked by COVID.
Yeah.
And it was horrendous. My business was on its knees. Um, so dealing with all of that, and then in July of 2020, I'm sat. The pubs have reopened. It's kind of mid-July, and I'm sat outside somewhere having a drink, just having a pint after work, and my phone rings, and it's the police. And basically, go home, and a policeman tells me that my youngest brother has been found dead at home.
Oh God.
So I know. So just which, I mean, to satisfy people's curiosity, I mean, he just had an accident somehow. He got the pubs had not long reopened. He liked to go to the pub also, and he'd been out that day, and we've had to piece this together retrospectively, but you know, he just went out, had one too many, and somewhere on the way home, or at home, we'll never really know. He's fallen and banged his head and had a bleed to the brain and died at home, and that's what happened to him. He was 39, and so he was 10 years younger than me. And he was a musician too. He was you know, really gifted piano player and concert pianist and teacher and accompanist and everything. And he played trumpet too. And he was a dad, and you know, it was just hugely tragic. And I remember at the time thinking, I just couldn't believe it. It was I thought I'd had enough.
Yeah.
You
I
know, not bad
understand.
luck or trauma as it was really. And
Yeah.
then I was like, it was just the straw that broke the camel's back, really. And I remember thinking or hearing a voice in my head or saying it. Yeah, I might have even said it out loud. And it was just, I said, I just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And I really didn't, you know, because I was already kind of felt like I was on a bit of a downer, and you know, the business is struggling, and you know, and I'm on my own and whatever. And then I lose my other brother, and I was just like, you know, and yeah, I remember thinking I don't care anymore. And to me, that meant a green light for me to do exactly what I wanted to do, which was just basically drinking when I felt like it, doing what I wanted, partying when I wanted, getting up to whatever, and that was what I did, you know. And then weirdly, again, which is it is odd because if you remember, Dave rang me just after my dad had died,
Yeah.
and my brother had died. My phone rang, and it was Dave again, and he said, "Oh, hi, Dave." He said, "Do you fancy joining the Waddies again?" And I was like, "What?" And they were having some personnel changes, and I got asked to rejoin Showaddywaddy, and I said, "Well, how many gigs you doing?" And he told me, and I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "I'm not doing anything else, you know." So I rejoined. He rang me literally a week after my brother had died. So that was kind of like, and my business was going nowhere at the time.
Have you ever talked to him about the timing of this?
I think possibly, yeah.
It's
But
weird.
it did it weird, yeah. But it did kind of fall like in my lap, and I was like, well, it gave me a purpose, and it gave.
Yeah, of
Not
course.
that I had no purpose, but I mean,
Yeah.
but it gave me a little bit more
It
focus,
could have
and
easily gone really south if that phone call hadn't happened both times.
I think so.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it was serendipity, wasn't it? That phone
It
call.
was really
Right.
because it definitely gave me some structure, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And I was still drinking a lot, you know, and doing the gigs and everything, and holding all that down. But I was, you know, since I was about 40, I've tried to keep myself in shape, you know, because that comes to us all. You kind of get to a certain age and you start to expand, you know. And so I'd learned that I got really into cycling. I did loads and loads of that. I was like super into that and lost loads of weight. And I'd done that from like 2014. Um, but at this point, I'd kind of let myself go in all sorts of ways. So I got
Yeah.
wider and hairier, and you know, I can send you some pictures. It's not a pretty sight, you know, and 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 yeah, I was just living life, you know, but I wasn't looking my best, but doing the gigs and enjoying it. I was still sort of enjoying that. I was enjoying the work, but it wasn't until about well, I know exactly when it was. It was the end of 2022, early 23, and I was on a holiday on my own. I went to Fuerteventura just on my own. My birthday's on New Year's Day, so I decided to go away for my birthday, and went on my own for 10 days. And I was there, you know, just sitting outside bars in the sun and doing all that holiday thing you do. But I realized that deep down, I'd already been doing a lot of work on myself. And, you know, I'd done yoga, I read a lot of self help books, meditation, and things. I was constantly trying to work on myself, even though I was drinking. Do you know what I mean? I was
Yeah.
still trying to improve myself. But I just really hit a point. I just thought, you know what? I'm fed up with this. I just thought, I don't want to be this person or this version of me anymore. You
Yeah.
know, and I really meant it. I didn't. I thought something's got to change. So I um, I listened to an interesting podcast while I was there. It was called "The Future You Already Exists," you know, and I think the purpose of that was trying to say that, you know, it, who you want to be starts today. You know, it starts with what decisions you make in the present moment and what you choose to do, what actions you take. It's not like you have to you don't have to put off being who you're going to be. You know, you can start by being that person today,
Yeah.
by the actions you take, and then who you be, you know, then you will naturally change in your appearance, and other things will fall into place by your actions. So, and I realized that, and I thought, I'm going to sort this out. And I really meant it. I felt that this quite deeply. And when I came back from that holiday, I did a dry January easily, and downloaded an app that measured the amount I was drinking because I wanted to measure, keep track of it. That was advice from that Adrian Charles book that I read. He recommended that was an app called Drink Less or Drinkless, which I used, which was free and just allowed you to record how many you had a day, and it gave you a green badge if you had none, a yellow one if you had a couple, and red if you had more than like three, you know. And I just vowed to have more green in my diary than anything else, you know.
Yeah.
So you can
Yeah.
look at a month in one shot, and I just thought, well, I'm just going to try and keep it green, and
Yeah.
if I can keep that, then it's okay. And I did for about 4 months. I was pretty good. Was drinking sometimes at the weekend, but I was keeping tabs on it. And then, but I was also working on other things. I've been on antidepressants since 2018. I wanted to come off those. So that 5 years I've been on those. Um, and that was another reason why I reined in the drinking, because I knew if I wanted to come off antidepressants, then I couldn't be drinking heavily. That was clearly not a good idea. So this was another reason to do that. So I tapered off those, and I also decided to move out of the premises that I'd had with my business, which I turned into a shop after COVID. That's another part of the story. Turned it into a record shop and cafe called the Piano Cafe. And but I decided I didn't want that premises anymore. It wasn't serving me. It was a bit of a chain around my neck, really. So I got out of that, moved out of there, which was a huge amount of work, and also decided to buy a house. I've been in rented for 7 years, and I did that, and I moved, and the drinking kind of picked up a little bit all the way through that, kind of came back. But I was achieving a lot in other areas of my life, and I also got a trainer that year, and I lost 3 stone and got in shape, and I felt great, and it wasn't until later that year, this is 2023, that I also decided that I didn't want to run the business anymore. I realized that that was something I just didn't have the love for anymore, the passion for. So I managed to broker a deal and sell that to someone else to look after. And then that was the end of 23. And then I was still drinking, but I set so many other things in line that then I felt ready to tackle the drink once again. It was the hardest thing to shift, I'd done all these other things, got into shape and sorted my house, business out, and my home. And then there was the drinking. And I got to the beginning of 24 and I thought, right, now it's about me and I'm going to sort this out. And I just had my last one on my birthday, which was the 1st of January 24. And that was the last time I drank, and I haven't drunk since.
Well done, mate. So that's what, 18 months coming up to?
Yeah, 18 months. I did 500 days, was in May.
Oh,
and it will be 18 months the end of this month. Yeah, I'm really proud of myself for.
So did you do it on your own? Like, did you just go, right, that's it? Or did you get help? Or how did you do it?
Pretty much. I kind of repeated what I'd done the previous year with the app, but with more, just a little bit more resolve to continue, I guess. I did dry January again. In fact, no, actually, what happened was I remember now. I did dry January, and then I thought I got to Feb, and then people around me were going, "Oh, are you drinking this weekend then, Dave? Because it's February now." I remember we were going away somewhere with the band on tour. We were staying away, and they were like, "So you're going to drink this weekend?" And I went, and I was like, "Am I gonna? I don't know." I thought, if I do, am I just going to end up drinking all the time again? And I didn't want to, and I thought, well, it was hard for me to think about going away with the lads and not having a pint. But I thought, well, if I do it this weekend, then I proved to myself I can do it, So I thought, that's what I'm going to do. So I went and I said no, and I made a decision before I went. I said, no, I'm not going to drink this weekend, and I didn't. And then I knew that I could do that, and then I just kept going. And then I thought, okay, I'm not going to bother then. And then I just kept going, and people were still around me saying, oh, how long are you going to stop for? And this started to really burrow into my mind, because I thought, what is this? It's like, if I stopped smoking,
yeah,
and I'd done like 2 months, which you say to someone, oh, 2 months, that's great. When are you going to start again?
Yeah, I know, it's mad.
I mean,
well, it justifies their own drinking, though, doesn't it? That's what I found.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on, and I just think it's just normalized in our society. It's seen as something that we do as a culture. It is culturally part of us. And it's seen still as, it's getting a little better, but it's seen as kind of odd if you don't. I mean, I used to go. I remember, because I have had lots of times when I've tried to stop drinking and had bits where I haven't drunk. I need to stress that there are periods where I haven't drunk, and I've given it up for a few months or whatever. But what I used to experience, I don't know if you got this, but I'd go to my local and I'd say, oh, I'll have a Diet Coke or something. And they'd look at you like this. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm trying really hard not to drink alcohol, actually.
Yeah, I know. Or not you or you pregnant, but there's always these little quips they come out with. But I think it's getting better. I do. I think that
Oh
you
yeah,
don't
it
get the
is.
questions anymore because they sell a lot of alcohol-free drinks. And, you know, with me, I was
Yeah,
like,
fell out.
I remember being in a pub in Wandsworth, and there was a big load of rugby players, or where they looked like rugby players and that. And I went up right in the middle of them and I went, I'll have a pint of lime and soda, please. And I wanted one to say, oh, you faggot or something. Do you know what I mean? Like drinking. And I wanted to say, yeah, actually.
Yeah.
But now I just don't bother. You know, I'm happy in my own skin with it. I don't have to justify why I don't
Me
drink.
too. Well, me too. But I wasn't. The first 6 months I found quite hard. I think I don't know, listeners might find this interesting, but I found it easier than I thought I was going to do 6 months, and was proud of myself for getting there. But I have to confess that there was a battle going on in my mind between the part of me that was proud of myself for stopping and wanted to do that, and the part of me that was asking, when are you going to start again? Which was asking the same question, basically, that my friends were and society was asking me. How long are you stopping for, Dave? When are you having a drink? Are you going to
Yeah.
have one? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, am I going to let myself have one? Am I going to moderate, basically? Am I going to try and moderate and just have one at the weekend or something?
Yeah.
Or am I going to keep going with being sober? And this was going on in my mind. And the longer I went on, the kind of more annoying that conversation became for me internally. I was like, oh, that's doing my head in, you know. And it would all the times I wanted to drink, I started to notice when they were on days when I was struggling because, as I've already said, I have issues with anxiety. I don't get depression so much these days, fortunately, but anxiety I still live with, and and often it's fine. I'm fine, but on a bad day, it's not great, you know. And then when I was having a difficult day, I'd be like, well, I just wish I could go to the pub with my friends today. It's a
Yeah.
Sunday, and I want to go down the pub and have a few jars and a laugh with everyone. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, because it was obviously escaping what the emotions I
Yeah.
was feeling that day. And I know you talked about this in your posts, and it's very true that giving up is only the first stage,
It
really,
is. It's
because
stage
then
one. It's like the foundations of an extension, you know, and you have to have solid foundations in the beginning. And you know, so many people hit 6 months and so, and they wonder who they are, you know, because it's like learning to drive. I find, you know, there's so many things to do in the beginning, and it keeps you occupied. And then, you know, there everyone's patting you on the back. Oh, you're doing really well, you know. But after 6 months, you're left on your own a little bit, and you're like, I don't know who the fuck I am actually.
yeah, no, exactly. And I was always the guy, you know,
Yeah.
for me as well as other people, but that was my thing. I'll go and have a laugh and have a few beers and all that, and it's like, and you're kind of grieving for that
Yeah.
person that you were, really. um and it's like you say, it's a novelty for a while, and then that starts to wear off and you start to miss it, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I always talk about that with losing people as well, you know. I mean, my dad's been dead for 17 years now, you know, but you miss them more because you haven't seen them for so long. Do you know what I mean? You kind of people say, have you processed it? It's like, well, I just miss them, you know. I haven't seen them for even longer, you know.
Yeah.
And the longer you go on without being drinking as well, you're kind of missing that person you were. It's like, oh, I want to be that
Yeah.
guy again, you
You're
know.
missing a lot of things, Dave, because you are in a bloody relationship with alcohol, you know,
Absolutely.
right? So
Yeah.
when you cut that relationship, for me, it was 40 years of being in this relationship, and I chose to end it. But there were times I really missed the chaos. You know, no one really talks about that. It's like, because you can get addicted to chaos. So my life was so up and down, it almost made it exciting. And when I become sober, it kind of flatlined after a while, right? And it's like my nervous system kind of missed the ups and downs of life, but because the flatlining, as I call it, was waking up and feeling good, eating properly, doing exercise, being mindful, practicing, you know, breath work and that. And everything was like all fitting into place. But my kind of internal instincts were we need a little bit of drama, mate, because what's going on here? Do you know what I mean? And that's
Yeah,
when I
yeah, yeah.
started
You
missing
just,
the chaos.
yeah, you just want to fuck it up a bit, don't you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
self-sabotage
that's
it to get it back. It's like the old days kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Let's smash the hotel room up.
Well, there's that. I totally agree. I mean, I think that alcohol was, of course, it's not your friend, but you think it is at the time,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's your buddy. I could be. I like to go to the pub to socialise, but I got to a point, and I never used to go on my own, but latterly I would be quite capable of going and having a few beers on my own. Do you know what I mean? Sitting on your phone, playing word games, or reading the news, or whatever you're doing, having a pint.
yeah,
And that's easy to do because you're with your friend. And I really noticed when I stopped sometimes how I would be in a pub, and let's say my friends hadn't turned up yet, and there was a lot of people, and I feel this anxiety come out. I was just like, oh man, no, I feel uncomfortable here.
yeah, yeah,
This
yeah,
is not okay. And you're holding a Diet Coke or a Zero or something, and you're like, yeah, this isn't cutting it. It's
yeah,
like, and it's hard, and you're having to sit with it. And it took a lot of time for me to get used to that. I'm much better at it now. I get what I'm ordering. And if I get uncomfortable like that, I just think you don't need to do anything, Dave.
yeah,
You don't need to say anything. You can just be exactly where you are. You're
yeah,
fine. But you're trying to, because you feel like you've got to do something. But what I was going to say was when I got to 6 months, I had this internal struggle, and I got fed up with it. And I said, right, what am I going to do about this? And I thought, right, fuck it. I'm not having any. That's it. I'm done. And I made a decision that I'm not going back to it. I'm not going to try and moderate, because I decided that I couldn't trust myself. That if I went into moderation, I wouldn't have a drink and then suddenly go and buy a bottle of whiskey. I don't drink whiskey anyway. It's like my kryptonite. Makes me very. It doesn't agree with me, whiskey. But what would happen, I think, is that I would have one or two, and that would then open the door to me the following weekend saying, oh, well, I had one last Sunday after my gigs, so I'll do it this Sunday. And then I'd do the next Sunday. And then it would be a day in the week. I'll have one.
yeah,
And then it would just gradually pick up over time to the point when it would actually get back to where it was. That's what I think would happen. And I thought, let's not do that. Do you know what I mean? So I just thought, no, I'll just not bother. And from that point, it got a lot easier, especially when vocalizing it, because when that question came up from other people in the pub, and they'd say, oh, how long you done now? How long you doing it for? I'd say, no, that's it, mate. I quit.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, no, I quit. I'm done.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, ask me another question.
Non-negotiable, mate. I always say, right, it's the best way to be, because if you leave the door open a little bit, it goes to play on your mind, and it's
Yeah,
like, well, maybe I could just have a glass of wine on a Friday. And before you know it, within a month, you're back to how you were, if not worse. It happens every time, right?
I got, I really felt for, I think it's Abigail Burrows, I think it
Burrows, yeah, the
is,
flute
who
player.
I listened to your podcast with her,
Yeah, yeah,
and she was talking about how she'd been sober for 5.5 years, had one glass of champagne,
yeah.
and it completely fell apart, and then took it another 10 years to get sober. I mean, I can't think about going back to um, drinking. This is the thing. It's your slave to it. It's like, even to having to think about it. That's what I got fed up with at 6 months. I wasn't drinking, but in my mind, it's still going, when are you going to have one?
Yeah.
And it's like, will you piss off? And it was only when I said, no, we're not having any, that it kind of shut up
Yeah,
a
it's
bit.
it's a non-negotiable. We're over. It's done. Like you
Yeah,
would with someone else. It's done. It's over. Get a grip,
that
kind of thing.
that
You know
doesn't
what
mean
I
that
mean?
urges don't still come, though. That
No,
doesn't mean, I
but
mean,
you
I had a
manage them
difficult,
different. I
you
think.
do, you do.
You know.
But it's like, I had a difficult day the other day, and I kind of thought, you know, I've got a very overactive mind. Lots of us do, and it can be your own worst enemy sometimes. And that's one reason why I drank, I'm sure, was that it used to shut it up. It used to quieten it down, slow it down, and I get a break from it. And I think that was one of the reasons why I used to use alcohol to unwind, because it would be like, this noise, and then a couple of
Yeah.
beers, talking crap, having a laugh, it's kind of got calmed
Absolutely.
down.
Do you know what? I'm going to start winding it down because I like to keep it within an hour, but I know we could talk
Sure.
forever. But what I found fascinating about your conversation is that we were very similar drinkers, but very different as well. You know, because I used to drink at home. And I also drank spirits in the end, which I used to hate spirits, but I found that it did the job quicker and I wasn't bloated so much, you know, so I drink vodka indoors and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it always goes back to the whole thing of, oh, are you an alcoholic? And I've never liked that label, but there are so many different types of drinker, and you're proof of that one where you would only socialize, where I went another level and drank indoors. But I find a lot of people drink indoors now. I think going right back years ago, I think the smoking ban in pubs started that off as well because it was cheaper to buy. You could get 3 bottles of wine in Asda's for 10 quid, 3 for 10. Right. And people go, do you know what? Bloody hell. I can sit indoors, I can have a fag, and I've got 3 bottles of wine for less than a round. Do you know what I mean? But I always say it doesn't matter whether you want to label yourself as an alcoholic or whatever you want to do. If alcohol is a problem, it's a problem. It doesn't matter. Even if I know people that have come to me for support and they've had 2 or 3 glasses of wine every single night, it affects their pairing and affects their sleep, their anxiety the next day and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if drink affects you in any negative way. It's time to look at it. Do you agree?
No, I do. Yeah. I mean, I definitely don't miss that dread feeling that you get in the morning when you wake up. It's like it's something. It's difficult to describe, but you wake up and it's like, oh, you know, it's not a hangover. It's something else.
Oh, mine was.
Yeah. Well, it's a hangover as well, but I was pretty good with it. I didn't get hangovers that badly. I didn't. This is the thing I want to perhaps make clear to people is that there were times definitely where I drank crazy amounts. I mean, I'm not just talking about the time when I drank 100 pints when I was at university. I mean, I'm talking about, you know, in my adult life, you know, days, and certainly when I was on my own and dealing with my second brother's death and all that I was definitely drinking too much. And there were days when it was completely out of hand, you know. But most of my drinking, most of it was in the pub with mates, standing at a bar, drinking 6 pints of lager or something.
Yeah.
What people would perceive as normal.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, lots of people wouldn't call that normal, but people who drink, who go to the pub, would just think that was what you do. It's just, and I was doing the same as other people around me. Do you know what I mean? So I didn't feel like I was an exceptional case necessarily, you know. And I think a lot of my drinking life was like that. It was just social and in line with the people I was hanging out with, because I didn't do it on my own, you know.
And I think the difference nowadays, Dave, and I mentioned it earlier, is in your dad's era, going to the boozer and having a few beers with your mates was normal. You know, I used to go to Skinner's Arms in Hatbridge and they had a pool table, a dartboard. And we, you know, I was 15 or 16 playing pool with the older blokes and being accepted into their thing. Do you want a pint, Dave? Oh, yes, please. You know, throwing darts, missing the board and whatnot. But back then, it was kind of acceptable because we didn't have the science to know actually 6 pints is every single day is way over the limits that they
right? Yeah, absolutely. But also they were drinking weaker beer. I think that's something to note as well. But it's the same with smoking. I mean, everyone smoked. I mean, you've only got to watch an old movie or you know, or old footage of people hanging out in the 60s and 70s and you know, even 80s. I tell you what, I watched a while ago. I was on the TV looking for something, and I watched an episode of Cracker. Do you remember that program?
Oh yeah, Robbie Coltrane, wasn't it?
I could watch it because it made me feel ill because everyone was smoking in it.
I was thinking.
I was like, it's in my lounge.
I know. Back in the day, though, in cinemas you could smoke, and on planes you'd sit at the back of a plane and smoke. But like that wouldn't go down the front. or in the car, you quite often be in the car as kids and your mum and dad would be sparking up a roll up and you're in the back of the car. Do you know what I
That's
mean?
horrible. I remember my dad doing that. Yeah, smoking with the windows up. You're just like,
Oh,
oh,
it's
horrible.
grim.
But yeah, so it was just accepted, and no one knew really, or not deep down, or accepted how dangerous it was. So yeah, but yeah, there we go. So it was. So what I was interested in was that, like you say, their definition of alcoholic, because it's often used. It's a very loaded label, that,
Yeah.
and people many times, to me, when I was trying to say temper my drinking or stop, would say to me, "Well, you're not an alcoholic because you don't drink in the morning."
Yeah.
It's like, well, and I would say to them, "Well, yeah, but it's no, I know I don't. I never have. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, but still, drinking every night and having a few pints every night is not good, is it? Oh, it's all right, And people would kind of normalize it, justify it. And I think that's the problem with that label, is it gets used to justify
Yeah.
regular heavy drinking, because you're not a chronic alcoholic like somebody who's lying in the street and can't
Yeah.
literally function. I mean, that's extreme. But most alcoholics, if we're going to use that term, look like I look like, like lots of us look like. They're the person that's going to the pub every day and quietly putting away 6 or 7 pints or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and going home and saying they haven't got a problem. It's like,
Well, this is why when I trained as a grey area drinking coach, there's such a huge spectrum that covers. Do you know what I mean? It could be
yeah,
not drinking every day, but binge drinking at the weekend, or it could be
mm-hmm.
2 or 3 glasses of wine with dinner, which, let's face it, right, is easily done. You can have a glass of wine before dinner while you're getting it ready, one with dinner and one as you're putting little Billy to bed. Do you know what I mean? And before you know it, that's 3/4 a bottle of wine every single night, right?
Yep.
And you add those units up. So it's problematic drinking, how I label it. Grey area drinking, middle lane is really what a lot of people are now, especially since COVID. There's a lot of drinking indoors that goes on as well.
Or another way to put it, which I've used as well, is a drinking habit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's because what is a drinking habit? Well, it's obviously a habit is something that we repeat, and do regularly. And like you say, it doesn't matter. Even if you don't drink in the week, but you're getting Sparko on a Friday and Saturday, and then you do it every week. Yeah. Well, it's still not great, is it? No. It's like it's there's something going on there, and it's like when people do dry January. I mean, I'm all for dry January if it's helped me to stop, to start to not drink. So I'm not going to knock it, but what I am going to say is that I don't think some people use it as a justification to say they don't have a problem.
That's what I used to do it for.
Yeah, and it's like, well, if I do dry January,
I ain't
got a problem.
I can go
straight back to February.
Yeah. February the 1st comes and it's wallop.
Yeah, but you haven't proved anything. All you've proved is that you're able to withstand not having it for a month. That doesn't mean to say you don't, because you've just gone straight back to it. So you've not actually changed your behavior. You've just stopped having it for a month. It's not holding your breath underwater or something. It's not. It's not okay. But you still need to breathe, don't you? It's like you've not changed it. Yeah. So I think that's important to note that. But as I say, I'm not knocking it. You've got to start somewhere.
I think it's a good place to start, and you can look at it like an experiment, and you can note down how you feel during that month. There's going to be good days, bad days, there's going to be a lot of triggers, and you can use it as evidence to where you need to maybe have a look at your drinking.
I agree with, yeah.
And then in February you think, well, do I want to go back to that, or do I want to give it another week? And That's right. It is a good starting place. But
exactly. And I think that you touched on something there that I think I want to share, and that is that something that I've learned that worked for me in changing not just my drinking but in other behaviors as well is not using previous versions of yourself to define who you are or who you can be. I mean, people will say, well, I'm a drinker, or another one in terms of exercise, people say, I'm not a runner. It's like, well, if you haven't been running, then no, you're not. But that doesn't mean you're not one. You can't be one just because you haven't done it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
I'm not a skydiver, but I've not done it yet. Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
but you know, if you start running 3 times a week, within a couple of months, you can say, "Well, I am a runner now,"
Yeah.
because you're evidencing the fact that you've done it. And you were saying with not drinking, it's like, "Oh, I'm a drinker. I'm not. I'm sober." Well, it's like if you keep doing it, you are giving further evidence to the person that you are now. Do you know what I mean? Or
Yeah,
that
I
you want
love
to
that.
be.
I love that mentality. That's brilliant. Well, Dave, I know that we could talk for hours. So I'll have to meet you for a coffee in where we live.
Yeah,
Uh,
man.
but thank you so much for sharing your story, and
No worries.
congratulations as well on your upcoming 18 months. That's fantastic.
Thank you,
Well
mate.
done, mate. I really appreciate this episode. You've been amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on. I hope it helps inspire other people to keep on their journeys.
I'm sure it will, mate. Thank you so much.
No worries. You take it easy. Cheers.